I think we'll get started now. There are still some people joining the group, so hopefully they'll have to catch up. So yeah, first of all, thank you very much everyone for joining this webinar. Obviously, I know this is probably for a lot of you a very difficult time going through the COVID-19 lockdown, and we're hoping that through this presentation we might be able to provide you with at least something that will allow you to come out of this and open your attractions and experiences safely. So over the course of this webinar, we will be discussing our concept, our development, Crowd Solo. It's an app that we've developed at Holovis. It's been specifically developed to support a range of attractions to open safely and to encourage social distancing. Yeah, we hope it's informative. There will be options to ask questions as we go through, and we'll come to that in a second. So quick introduction for those of you who don't know who's leading the conversation. My name is Pete Cliff. I am the creative director at Holovis, and joining me on the call is Jos van der Steen, who is the development director. Between us, we look after the special projects within Holovis, so anything that is turnkey and more bespoke. I will say, as I said, any questions, if you don't or haven't seen it already, there is a little orange tab somewhere on your screen. If you click that, you'll find a little questions bar. Type your question in there. We see them all. They're coming through all through this webinar. There's already quite a few already. We'll try and answer them all at the end. Some might be repeats, so we won't answer every single question, but please do post your questions and we will answer them at the very end of the presentation. So a quick introduction. I know not everyone on the call will know who or what Holovis is. Most of you will probably know us from doing large-scale digital attractions, things like projection mapping, dark rides, etc. But actually, we have a significant background in app development and software solutions. We started doing what we called extended experiences, which was where we used app-based experience to engage guests whilst in a park some 4 or 5 years ago with the launch of Battle for Cedar Point. That led us on a kind of track of development, and we gained a huge amount of knowledge in developing apps for themed entertainment locations. We've since developed beyond that and done a lot of work with what we call HoloTrack. But when this situation occurred, we kind of looked to ourselves and said, how can we help? This is an industry that we adore so much. It's an industry that's kind of fed us as a company, and now to see everyone struggling in such a way it's quite heartbreaking, to be quite honest with you. So we dug into our kind of experience, said, well, how can we leverage what we know and what our team are so brilliant at developing? And we thought actually a very low barrier to entry and ease of use solution would be to create a social distancing app and something that can help manage those crowds, and that's what we've done. So as I said, this webinar is going to be about explaining that and its core feature set. Crowd Solo boils down to 2 core components. The first component is a ride or attraction or exhibit, depending on what your experience or location is, reservation system. Now, this isn't a virtual queue. It must be, I must make that very clear. I don't think a virtual queue would help in this situation, because obviously if you're not putting people in queues, they're going to displace into public areas. We're still assuming there is a queue or there's still people in these areas, but anywhere where you've got some kind of restriction on volume or guest numbers, we're creating a reservation system so you can manage those numbers and disperse them easily across an attraction. The second feature, which is a hugely powerful feature, is a deep smarts backend, data backend system. So whilst you've got users using this booking reservation system, you can actually see where they're all moving around the park or moving around the attraction in real time, which means you can manage hotspots, you can deploy staff efficiently, and also you can use that data both in real time, so you can look at the attraction as a snapshot where everyone is across the experience, or you can actually do it historically. We think that's incredibly useful as well, because we're assuming that a lot of your attractions are probably going to have to open with limited capacity. But actually, if you have the information there that shows you weren't in any jeopardy of overloading the system or overloading the staff, you can actually start to ramp up your operations and ramp up your attendance figure with that peace of mind. So as I said, two primary functions. We've got a ride reservation system or attraction reservation, and also the back-end deep smarts. We are making some assumptions in the creation of this app. Now, for some of you, this type of operational change either won't be necessary or might be too much of a step, but we are making some assumptions. The first one is that operations will have to change. We will have to see some kind of crowd distancing. We will have to see caps on capacity and occupancy. And on the basis of that, we're saying that the use of this app within your locations would have to be a must. If you want to ride the rides, if you want to go and visit this experience, you have to use the app in order to book it. That's a way of monitoring it and centralizing it. That's also the second point on this list here, that management of those queues or experiences could get messy if you don't have a centralized system. So if you're just going to put someone on the front of an experience or front of a queue, and they're literally just limiting the amount. So let's say you had an experience that had a capacity of 2,000 and you reduce that down to 500. It's all fair and well not allowing people into the queue, but then you'll create a secondary queue at the front of the entrance to the attraction as people wait for the free available time slot. This doesn't allow that, because it's dispersing people in real time. It knows what's busy and what's not, and allows you to have good oversight over that that operation. We're also assuming, and I think quite rightly so, that guests and attendees and visitors are willing to adapt in order to have their freedom back. I think you've probably seen it all before. People, and this is actually a very true belief of mine, people will be desperate to get out and get to these attractions as soon as this lockdown is lifted. But they also want to do that safely. And this gives you the opportunity and the route to do that. And because they're desperate, they are willing to adapt. Something that's typical before of downloading an app or getting over that kind of adoption rate can be a challenge, but we do believe people will be willing to do this. And finally, this system will give people and guests peace of mind. Who's the app for? We see it as being attractions that are classed as single ticket admission. So somewhere like a zoo, a theme park, a haunt, where you pay your entrance fee and then everything else is a free for all, because you don't have the current infrastructure to manage admissions and pre-books for those individual attractions. This gives you that tool to do that. It's been great, because since launching this, we've been absolutely inundated with sectors that we didn't anticipate to be interested kind of coming to us. So I've put here, shopping malls and industry. A shopping mall, in theory, operates like a themed attraction. Single entry at the point in every retail store is an attraction. Imagine being able to book access to those attractions or those shops in order to manage capacity. This works in the same way. Anywhere with high density of people and potential bottlenecks.
So Pete's going to go through and run through some of the different UI and what that looks like. But I wanted to take a second to talk a little bit about the technology that we're using within this app development. So a few principles that we're applying within this development that we're engaged with. The first is that the app needs to be very, very lightweight. So we're using an application that allows us to build this app in a lightweight way, and it be portable to Android and iOS devices. As well, we're leveraging GPS tracking to help drive some guest benefits in terms of identifying which parks they're at, and some analytics around maps and dispersion analysis. But then we're also combining this with some additional tracking technologies like Bluetooth tracking under specific scenarios. And then the final benefit of this is that it's all available within the cloud. The design of the application is designed in principle to be almost entirely data-driven. And that becomes very interesting when we start to think about the way in which we can leverage the way in which people are using the application, the way in which they're moving around the space, around the park, around the mall, and then combining it with what they're actually physically doing. So some really valuable information, and it's very, very core fundamental within the design of the application. So within that as well, and this will become a bit more apparent when we start running through the actual usability of it, but we have an ability to be able to customize the app to more tailor it towards your specific park. So what this means from a kind of theme park perspective is that even if you choose not to do any of this additional customization, we'll be working with your teams anyway to outline which rides and which times are appropriate within our kind of consultation period following this seminar. But we actually allow the ability to customize that UI and really make it tailored towards your core branding, really. This is also combined with a operator dashboard that allows us to lock down rides if they're under maintenance, for example, and we've got a workflow system behind that so that we can so that the guest satisfaction isn't negatively impacted from closures while being in this booking system. And then finally, the final piece of the puzzle that I touched on briefly were these analytics that are being driven by the system. So within the free application that we're providing, we're also giving a 6-month license to our Deep Smarts analytics product, which allows us to analyze the information that's being driven from the app and transform that into usable graphics, charts, and data points. Pete, if you want to run through the usability of the app?
Absolutely. So yeah, this is basically running through from the point in which a user downloads and switches on the app all the way through to booking a ticket. So just to explain how it works, as Jos said, what we ask you to do is provide us with basic data such as your attraction logo, ride capacity or attraction capacity, any key messaging that you want to drop in there. We will drop that in free of charge as this base function, as a template function. And this is what will be experienced by the guests. So first thing we do is when the guest opens the app, we will ask them to create an account. Very, very simple, just a username and a date of birth. We can authenticate people's date of birth on the second stage. Then when you're at the park, we use GPS to verify that you're at that location. So it will see that you're within the boundary of the attraction, and you tick the box to say that you are there. If you're outside of that GPS geofence, you can't use it. So people outside of your attraction can't cheat your system. Everyone has to be in the park. The next stage to that is you actually get a welcome message, a personalized welcome message, which basically says, thank you for using this app, and the reason why we're trying to encourage people to social distance. So, and I think that's quite important, and that can be personalized from a user and attraction by attraction case. The next feature, which we think is incredibly important, is your ability to add dependents. So you can add dependents to your account. So let's say you've got kids who don't have an app or a phone with them, or people who don't want to use an app in your family group. You can add them to it. Each person is a unique user, so again, it can't be gamed by anyone. So you add users to your app and they become your family unit, and therefore you can book on behalf of everyone else in your group. Doesn't mean that you have to ride. So if there's smaller children's attractions, for example, you can book for them. You don't have to take part in it, but again, it manages the capacity in a very easy way. The second thing you can do is you can actually group together other people's accounts. So if you've gone to the attraction with a group of friends or cohabitants that all have the app, you can group everyone together and there can be a lead booker. Again, it kind of avoids a little bit of the faff from having to manage lots of different bookings, and also avoids that difficult shoulder period between two time allocations. So if you're trying to book for something, you've got 4 or 5 people in your booking and you just catch the end of the booking, that doesn't spill over into the next time slot. So you can only ever book for the allocation that you have available, which is incredibly useful. After this, you're actually taken into the ride view. Next slide, please, Jos. The ride view is given on two view perspectives. There is a list view, which you can see here as the first image, or there's also a map view. I'll just say the map isn't live. It's not like Google Maps. It would be an image based, but what we'll do is we'll drop location icons all over the map, and you're able to click on those to open up the ride, so you can look where you are relative to that attraction. Once you click on the ride, you choose if you want to book for people in your group or just yourself. And then once you've defined how many people in your group or in your dependents there are, it gives you the available time slots split into the delineation of, let's say, 15 or 30 minutes for that attraction for your group. You click on your preferred time slot, you choose the time, and then it goes into your ticket wallet. Your ticket wallet shows you all the attractions that you've had throughout your day and all of your upcoming attractions. What we've specified at the moment is there are actually 2 ticket bookings available at any one time. This is basically to allow guests to do and experience the attraction or park in the way they would anyway. We're basically assuming that someone's going to go to an attraction, then as they're in the queue, in that small socially distanced queue, they can start prepping, where should we go next, and then pre-plan. Once that ticket time has lapsed for the queue that you're in, a new slot becomes available. So you're always one ahead moving through the day. And that allows you to, like I say, for guests to experience their day without any disappointment. And they're still engaged doing stuff. Like I say, they're not going to sit outside of a queue. There still will be a queue, and those queues will be in line with your capped capacity for the attraction. If you're somewhere that's welcoming 30, 40,000 people a day, that's all in line with the balancing that you provide us with. Then we get the ticket. The ticket is time stamped, date stamped, and also there's an animation on there so people can't print screen and reuse the ticket time and time again. We also have the opportunity here to go into the account and change any push notifications, privacy settings, change your detail, etc. So there's lots of functionality that can be modified and customized by the user. It is worth saying at this point, we have also considered if you have an outage. For a theme park, we know that rides do have outages, technical issues, which can be as short as half an hour or as long as days. So we are giving operators the opportunity to manage that from a centralized control system. The way we manage that is if someone is in a queue for an attraction where they booked a time and that attraction goes down whilst they're in that queue and that queue has to be evacuated, the user will receive a wildcard ticket with no timestamp on it, with no attraction stamp on it, so they can choose anything they want to at any time. That'll still be a single use, but that's how we get over that potential issue. If you haven't joined the queue yet, so the ride or attraction goes down and is evacuated at 10:30, but your ride is upcoming at 11, we will give that person a push notification to say the ride's gone down. You can use this time slot for any other attraction at the same time. That deals with any issues that are incurred with making sure that the guest experience is upheld. Yeah.
Cool. So as I sort of briefly touched on before, the fundamental core of this app is it's very data driven. And as I sort of previously mentioned, we have a additional product that we've been developing for a number of years now called Deep Smarts, whose main focus is really to pull in disparate data sources and then standardize them and then allow them to sort of combine together and collaborate to be able to drive new insights and activities within the park. So as part of the free offering, as I previously mentioned, we're offering 6 months free where we're going to be using the data that's coming out of the application, so the way in which people are actually moving around the park, and come up with a number of reports which will utilize this information to come up with metrics on performance around popularity, as well as live heat maps and dispersion of where guests are moving within the space, which obviously has knock-on benefits for operations and general staff management. So we're going to play a video now, and as I play, Pete is going to narrate over the top.
Yeah, so this is just to show how the app works in situ. As you can see, you create the account as soon as you log on to the app, date of birth. You can authenticate your age, and then you're asked to confirm your attraction where you are. Receive a welcome message, then add dependents to your booking. Create a group and link accounts together, and then you get the map view. That can flip onto a list view, and you can add group members, proceed, and book your time. You choose that, you choose and add that to your ticket wallet. You can click on the ticket, show it to the attendant at the front of the attraction, and then that time slot is lapsed and becomes a new ticket availability later on in the usage of the app.
Yeah, and the way in which that wildcard works is that even if a ride is fully booked, a wildcard ticket will allow you a time slot that's already fully booked.
It's worth mentioning at this point that we are assuming that some people might not be able to use the app if they have battery life failure, and also that if you do get outages, you are going to have to displace people at certain times. We're assuming that you're going to put a boundary, a buffer, should I say, in every attraction to allow for any of these problems. But I think the big thing is, as long as 75% of your guests are adhering to this level of crowd dispersion and management, that will have a significant impact on the opening strategy for your park. You don't want everyone going to the key attraction straight away. That's the worst thing you want, because if that happens, you'll just have crowding around that space. This pushes people to move around the attraction, and also gives a fair policy to allow everyone to enjoy every single attraction within a day, whilst also experiencing their day as they would without any social distancing measures. So just to summarize, what we have here is a simple customization feature. We have a mobile booking application for attractions. We allow users to create accounts and synchronize those accounts together by creating groups or dependents. A basic portal for you to manage any breakdowns or outages, but also to review movement of guests throughout the day, and also a data retention tool to be able to review that in real time, but also historical data, and plan accordingly to reopen to a larger capacity.
And then as kind of previously highlighted, here are a number of the reports that will be available within the operator portal. So real-time review of guest movement. So this is really leveraging the tracking ability that's natively available within the application, and being able to correlate the way in which guests are moving around the park to influence how to move staff in an effective manner to enforce social distancing, as well as to highlight potential risk areas, bottlenecks that are occurring within the park, all in real time and all actionable through the Deep Smarts dashboard. And as Pete said, we have 3 days data retention within the free package that's driving a lot of these analytics. So in terms of accessibility, we are opening the app on Apple Store and Google Play. The app is going to support from iOS 11 to the current iOS, which is 13, I believe, and be compatible with Android Marshmallow in terms of the operating system. So Pete, did you want to just talk through the first of these?
Yeah, so hopefully everyone has kind of seen the basic premise, or understands the basic premise of what we've tried to develop, and it has been quite challenging to create something that was universal for all and could help as many use cases as possible. There have been a couple of features from some of the sample groups we've discussed this with over the past week or so. that we think we are capable of creating, but it's a little bit bespoke. So we just need to assess those on a case-by-case basis and understand how we integrate them. But just to identify some features that others have asked for that we will explore if we get enough interest in those areas. Things like adjustable or variable time slots. Not everyone wants to do half-hour time slots. Some people might want to do an hour. Some people might want to do 5 minutes. The variability of that is something that some operators might want, i.e. you're able to change those on the fly. Half an hour doesn't work, let's reduce it to 20 minutes. Adjustable or variable capacity. This attraction is done really well on 500. Actually, let's up it to 750. Another option there. Gamification. We have a long history of creating gamification experiences using IP and non-IP. One thing we've discussed is how do we make social distancing a positive thing? Gamification could be that answer. There is an option to do that, and again, something we'd be willing to discuss. A fully branded app. Not everyone wants to use Crowd Solo, understandably. You can, as an operator, fully brand the app if you want to. Obviously, there will be some additional cost incurred in that because it's a case-by-case basis, but it's not going to be massive, and it would allow you to have your own app and host it through your own app portal. So there are some options there as well. And also adding things like general attraction info, so opening times, park maps, guest info, etc. We can add that as well, and that can obviously expand the app's usability out beyond simply a reservation system.
Yeah, and then just to touch on some of the final points, and to echo what Pete was saying there, a lot of this is applications and technologies that we are currently using, but in different areas. And really, our focus and priority for Crowd Solo was to get something that really functionally performed and drove the kind of benefits that we think would be required in a kind of social distancing world. Now, that's not to say that these features don't add to that. They just weren't seen as our critical MVP features. So a lot of these are either in the roadmap already or can be further discussed. But the person-to-person proximity warnings generally using Bluetooth. So this is the idea. I mean, mobile phones will emit a Bluetooth signal in a kind of radius. And when another Bluetooth signal interferes with that radius, you can get a notification that a guest is within a certain distance, and being able to trigger automatic notifications to people that they are within a certain proximity, and even stretching this to include knowledge that certain family groups, so family groups are all together and self-isolate together, so shouldn't be seen as a threat within the park that they're congregating together, because that's already their self-isolating group. So being able to really build on that to trigger alerts and notifications. API integration. So the majority of people on the call will be using different technologies within their suite of applications, ranging from CRM systems to ERP systems to ticketing, and each of these interfaces will require some degree of integration with, if we wanted to layer on top of it. And generally, we treat that as a case-by-case conversation. But also, we can extend this API into the data aggregation. So although we might not be interested in EPOS and CRM data within, say, the core Crowd Solo application, we might be interested in tying together information that we know around guest movement and guest flow into related retail and ERP, CRM data sources. So within that world of integration, it's something we're very familiar with, and can obviously extend the application to those areas. The next one is the 1-year flexible data retention. So in order to create something that was able to be used en masse by yourselves to really help people get back to the parks, really, we've set a 3-day period on data retention. Now, obviously, this is as scalable as we want to make it, and we can look into deployments of that data, both on a cloud infrastructure that we've got that Crowd Solo is currently supporting, or deploying on-premise or using a hybrid model. So all of that data retention policy and how long we keep data and how useful we can make it is all extension opportunities. As well, by signing up to the kind of more premium plan, you get 2 custom reports per month or an equivalent workload. And obviously this is again flexible, but really is based on working with our data acquisition team to help define reports that are generating the value and the insights that are business critical to you. So that finishes our run through of the webinar. Before we jump on to next questions though, I just want to talk about next steps for any interested parties. Now at the end of this questions portion, we're going to have the contact details of myself and Pete on the screen. We're asking that all of the requests for additional information, if you're interested, go through to Pete. From there, we will directly work with you to look into booking some initial consultation time to further talk you through some of the operational requirements for the app, because we're seeing this as very much a partnership model in terms of how we coordinate with the existing park. And within that session as well, we can answer any follow-up questions that you might have that you don't feel confident asking within the forum that we've got here. We will now steadily move to the questions section. So I'm just going to get the questions up. Now, Pete, if you've got anything that you want to start with.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first question is actually, will the webinar be available as a recording? Yes, we will release this as a recording afterwards. So if anyone wants to review this or share it with their teams, please go ahead. So thank you for that question. We've got a question here. When will this become available and which companies have you forwarded the idea towards? So it's been forwarded to you. So we've got 240 people on this webinar. So everyone who's been on here, a huge range of operators have got in touch. So lots of different applications for this. We are targeting 4 to 6 weeks for this app to be available for our users. We obviously want to go as quickly as possible, but it's a fairly complex piece of technology that we're navigating at the moment. So as quick as we can. We think that probably aligns with when the reopening strategy is put in place. So yeah, 4 to 6 weeks is when we're hoping to have it ready for launch.
So Pete, the next question is from Sam Power. If you flip down to that question, it's probably one for you.
Yeah, so Sam's asking a question about how attractions such as the dungeons and similar will be affected by the lockdown. There isn't necessarily a direct question to the app. It's more about how operations will change. I mean, I think, like I say, I think for the first 6 to 12 months when we reopen, those type of attractions will need to limit on capacity so people aren't close together. There is some functionality in this platform that we're developing that will manage that. So the Bluetooth to Bluetooth pinging that we were talking about can also help in those scenarios. But I think a lot of that will come down to you as operators in terms of what you do. We do have the tools to support with that. So as I say, if you're in a situation where you've got attractions that are very similar to that, I'm thinking haunts as well, you know, we might be able to create feature sets that are specific to your use case. What I would highly recommend is if you do have specific user cases that haven't really been addressed, but maybe almost get addressed in this webinar, please get in touch, because we could find 10 people with the same problem. And if you all group together, we can try and help everyone out together as well. So thank you for that question.
You want to take the next question as well?
Yeah, it's a question about, do we plan to add a virtual queue feature? We're not a virtual queue system. There are other opportunities and products available on the market that do virtual queuing. We're purely a reservation and guest management system. We think that is what we need to do and what we can offer as a free platform in order to open safely. And that's what we've kind of based our development on.
So next question, how do you suggest dealing with guests who, for whatever reason, cannot and will not use an app? A very good question, and one that we obviously within the app mobile software development world come across a lot. So that in any kind of technical solution that you try to implement at scale like this, there always needs to be some level of a manual workaround in cases of in situations like this. So when we work more closely with any interested parties on the operational side, we'll talk about things like battery life of phones and how we might need to envisage looking at having battery stations available for people to charge up. Now, if they're purely not willing to take part in the phone at all, or potentially their phone gets stolen, gets lost throughout the day, these situations do occur. We have a paper-based setup to be able to facilitate smaller numbers of people.
Yeah, I think as we said earlier as well, we're not assuming that every single person on the park is going to adhere to this system. I think if anyone's familiar with British lockdown at the moment, that lockdown was on the premise of 50% of the country accepting it and adhering to the rules. We want a good portion of your guests to adhere to the rules. Not everyone has to, and obviously we wouldn't let them know that, but not everyone has to for this system to be effective. There's also the other side of this, which is not necessarily the function of the app, but also it's the emotional safety of your guests and the perception of how safe you're being. Having this layer in there, we think, could be a great tool, even purely as a messaging piece. I think the two go hand in hand. But as we say, there is always going to be a backup to support with that.
So next question. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go on, please, Joss.
So have we considered how the solution could be adapted to a setting in which people don't have access to phones, such as water parks? Another good question. So in the case, it's something that we've continually discussing ourselves. So while we've been developing this, we're very much challenging ourselves with some, the range of applications for this. In a situation where phones aren't desirable to use, we could incorporate wearables within some fashion. Now, Holovis have an extensive history using wearables, and we're using them in our live projects at the moment, ranging from RFID to Bluetooth-driven technologies. And really, it would be the coordination of some of these wearable devices in conjunction with the base bookings features that we would look to roll out. But again, if you have a particular use case in mind that you're thinking of, that you like the application of this booking technology, but you don't see how it's feasible within your park, within your water park, for example, because of the mobile phone component, please don't let that be a blocker for implementing something like this, because there are alternative solutions that we could deploy. What we've really tried to do with Crowd Solo is create something that can be used en masse by the majority of people. And we live in a world where the majority of people do have phones and use phones. Obviously, water parks are consideration on top of that. So the answer is yes, we have considered it. It's not available within Crowd Solo day one. Wearables are well within our capabilities, and we're using them quite extensively within the company. So it would be marrying the two. So please get in touch if that's interesting, and I hope I've answered the question.
Yeah, we've got a question here about when the app will be ready. We've said 4 to 6 weeks, so I hope that's answered. Do you want to take the next question, Jos?
And just on that, so when the app will be ready, 4 to 6 weeks. Now, there will be some of you that want to open ahead of this time. What our recommendation is to still engage with us, because what we would look to do is work out what that operational requirement would be for your venue, so that when we were in a position to launch Crowd Solo, we could really hit the ground running and add that level of social distancing and kind of guest satisfaction and assurance, really. So next question, does it require an active internet connection? So good question. It requires an active GPS location. So GPS, not the same thing as data, but you can have areas that are blackout areas that have no GPS connectivity or limited. Now, it's not a heavy component of the app, so it would be as part of that consultation phase that we go through, we'll talk you through some of the requirements for the app, but a data connection is one of them. Now, if you don't have any connectivity within the park, we can look to deploy an alternative tracking solution to get the same level of functionality. But obviously, depending the benefits of GPS are it's natively available within the phone and will give us coordinate locations in terms of where people are. Now, if we looked to say we were in an environment that either was tiered, so GPS wasn't as accurate because we're ranging across floors, or we're in a blackout area, we could deploy Bluetooth technology using anchor points to acquire the same level of functionality, but there may be a small infrastructure related cost in terms of the installation of some of these Bluetooth fidelity markers. So again, yeah, go ahead, Pete.
Just going to say, to add to that, there is a certain amount of data needed to book tickets, however,
Yes.
but that can be used either using the phone's data or through a Wi-Fi system as well. We're not thinking that people are going to be booking tickets all the time during the day, so it's going to be at certain times. It's nowhere near heavy use on data at all. So we really, with most phones, most users and most attractions, we don't see that being a significant challenge.
So I'll take the next question as well, if that's all right, Pete. So does the App Store guest demographic info? What are some concerns related to storing guest geocode data? The app will capture data when the guest leaves the park. So really, we've been quite limited in the amount of information that we're trying to capture from the guest. The original envisaging for CrowdSolo wasn't a guest demographic analysis tool. Obviously, there's some useful insights that we can gain through the core functionality of the app, but that wasn't the main driver for it. And we thought that it would actually decrease adoption rates if we had too onerous a process within that registration. So we've kept it super simple, and to add to that, to be GDPR compliant and COPA compliant where necessary, we've anonymized a lot of the data from a data aggregation and analysis perspective anyway. So that helps safeguard us against GDPR, specifically in the UK, well, in Europe, and in the US, COPA. We're well aware of the legality around that and have baked into the design of the app steps to negate any negative effect that's going to have. So I hope that answers the question, and if it doesn't, please get in contact after the webinar. So next question, what map does it use? Is it just Google Maps? So the map that it uses is actually not Google Maps, it's a static image. Number of reasons for this, but potentially one of the more fun reasons for it is that it can be a very stylized map. If you had a park and you had a specific brand that you were trying to get across in terms of the aesthetic of how your map looked, this would be a great opportunity to do that. So we're using static maps. It's not Google. It uses some analytics to be able to identify where the pins are, but other than that, it's a static map. What mapping backend powers the attraction map? What layer view does it support? So I potentially answered some of that in the last answer. The map itself is a static map. Now, all of the data that the guest is reading within that is held within our central storage, which is cloud-based, that everything scales from. So there's no onerous changes in the front-end application if we want to make any updates to text or adding of additional rides and features. So as I kind of mentioned in the beginning, it's a very, very data-driven approach in terms of mobile development. I'm going to say what layer view does it support is what languages is it being built in and what framework is it using. I'm not sure. So if there's something more specific on that, please get in contact. But we're planning to, well, we're building it on React Native.
Just as a point here, we've got about 50 questions, so we might have to speed up a little bit, and there are some that are repeated, so we do hope we get to them. If there are any that we miss that we don't address straight away, again, please do speak to us directly. We just don't want to take everyone's complete day up by going through each of these one by one.
Yes. Do you want me to? Should we just rattle on through as many as we can, or did you want to cherry pick
No,
some?
I think so. You carry on, and I'll extract any in particular I think are
Cool.
particularly.
Is Crowd Solo allowed to integrate with another app? You guys have an app in your park. Can we include it within a feature for the rides? The answer is yes, but obviously we need to reach out and work out the way in which you built your app and how we can layer on top of it. Again, it's something we've done in the past. Crowd Solo itself is not natively able to just integrate automatically with an existing application, so there's going to have to be some work there. But if it's something that you're interested in, please get in contact. And as I said, it's very much work we've done in the past. Any legal disclaimers required to communicate to guests? So within the actual app screen, there's a disclaimer page. And depending on the level of intelligence that we want to bring into that data analytics piece that I'm talking about, and if we wanted to extend any of it to auxiliary data sets, then yes, we probably would need to write or at least vet whatever clause you have within your current guidelines or principles when guests come into the park is reflective of that. But we have a very strong data team here at Holovis who are more than comfortable to walk through any legal documents that you might have to give assurances around that.
Okay, next question is, will the guests be able to use the same app for multiple parks and attractions? Absolutely. Each attraction that you own or operate is dealt with like a different inquiry we're getting with everyone who's on this webinar. So it's the same app, it just has to be in a different location. If, for example, you have multiple attractions in a very close proximity, you'd use the same app and people would see the attractions based on where they're at, so we can categorize them within different kind of umbrella terms. So that's easy enough for us to do. Question here about, has any consideration been made to controlling capacity to get into the main entrance? Absolutely. One of the things we identified when we were developing the app is probably one of the most challenging areas is going to be turnstiles at the start and end of a day. Everyone tends to leave, everyone tends to come at the same time. Because we've got this incredibly strong data component, you'd be able to see how bad or good that process was after day one of using the app. How busy are you on the turnstiles? How many people did you have per square meter, for example, in that space? If it does become challenging, you could essentially deem the entrance as its own attraction and ask people to book, so you do phased admissions. So absolutely, that is something we've already thought about, and we think this would give you a good understanding of that. We've got a question here about whether we can use it for food and beverage purchasing. There is a capability to add that as a feature, absolutely. It's not in our initial MVP, not something we want to roll out straight away, but we do have it on our roadmap to allow you to do multiple bookings and buy tickets as well.
Next question, how many languages are available within the app? The app is being built for English only in its first deployment. Obviously, if there's strong localization requirements around having them in other languages, we can please engage us over that. The app will be released globally though. So we don't have any limitations of where we can release the app. We've had a lot of experience deploying apps in some of the faraway locations in China as well, so all of that is very much known.
I'm going to jump down to Eric's question here. The question is, what does the ride operator need to do to validate the time ticket, and what technology needs to be available at each attraction to support this concept? Our base version is lightweight, so we're not asking you to have any further infrastructure in order to validate tickets. People simply have to show their ticket, which will have a timestamp on it, a date, an animation that shows they get into that attraction. Once they're in the attraction, because they'll be in the time lock of which they book the ticket, that will lapse, which then gives them the ability to book the next ticket, and that therefore validates it. If you do want to go one step further, we can create an operator app interface and a QR code system that validates each ticket, probably as a train ticket works, which you'll be very familiar with. Again, not in our base version, but it's something we can do. So if you want to go that next level up, we can absolutely support with that.
I think that's answered quite a few of the next questions actually, Pete, because they're all in a similar vein. I'm going to jump on Morgan's question. Is there training available for park staff? So yes, and all of those all of the next stages around deploying this app and how it means from a running it on the ground perspective and the requirements around it, we will follow up with the interested parties and have those conversations on a one-to-one basis. So if it's interesting, please get in touch.
How many reservations at any one time per guest? At the moment, we're saying 2 reservations at any one time. Something you're basically heading towards, and something in the future of that, so you can plan your way around the park. Again, if you want to do more or less than that, we can do that, not a problem.
I'm going to jump on to Laurie's question. So is there a limitation on the number of staff members who can have the admin accessibility to see the crowd maps for our property? The answer is, within the free application, we're allowing 1 license for the operator view, but it is portable to mobile devices, so it's built in a web-based format, so you can access it through a variety of devices. And as we kind of highlighted in the beginning, the app's and the aggregate data piece as well is very, very data driven. So it doesn't require a beefy computer in a centralized location to be able to run it from. Cool.
Kevin's question here is a good question. Can you message guests individually or in bulk, such as telling them about a ride with availability slots, or this area is very busy, stay away? That's absolutely on our roadmap to create. It's one of the more immediate functions that we're trying to develop. To do a heat mapping solution that's a guest view version, so they can see which areas of the park are busy and which areas are not, which can help them plan their day. Obviously, they already have the ride availability, but maybe it's not a ride, maybe it's a zone you want to go and visit, or a character meet and greet, all that kind of stuff. So that can definitely be integrated into it. That can also lead into a plan my day function. So something that is automatically registering where you are, what rides are nearby, what your preferences are, using that data in order to provide you with the best day possible. Of course, all of these things spill into longer term capabilities that, once we're past this COVID-19 challenge, could be just great tools for the park. Same goes for the messaging. Once we have people with an app, we are looking, and this is slightly more future, to put a messaging system in. If that's really important now, absolutely something we can integrate.
Can you answer the question from Christian around how to control the entrance of a park works? So from an operation perspective, how that's?
I think we covered that in the last one, to an entrance of a park.
Yeah. Is there an SDK to integrate Crowd Solo natively into an existing guest-facing app? The answer is, at the moment, no. And we would look to do that integration work primarily, most likely ourselves, or at least make our services available with a third party. So if it's something that you're interested in, please get in touch. I think I covered a number of the points on that previously.
Alan's question here is, how many guests can be added to a group? At the moment, we're saying 4 additional guests, so 4 dependents can be added to your ticket. As far as basically larger group sizes, what did we say for that, Jos?
So I think it was 5 people.
5 people.
I mean, a lot of this as well is obviously customizable. So what we've done is we've built the MVP version of Crowd Solo, which functions in the way that we've just showcased. Now, a lot of the settings and a lot of the features are malleable, just in the nature of modern software development. So if there's don't think that any of the things that we've said, if you think that there's an initial limitation or inherently blockers, I think, you know, a lot of those kind of things we can work through together. Okay.
So Ben has asked a question here, and it's quite far down because there's a lot of repeats. So Ben said, can you talk more about how you'll not have guests waiting outside ride queues waiting for their time? Well, that's the principle of the app at its kind of most core format. This is to stop that from happening. Again, if you simply put a person on the front of the entrance to every queue and let people engage in the park as they would typically, and there's a max capacity for a queue line which has gone from 2,000 to 500, your most popular attractions are just going to get huge amounts of people waiting outside as you're spilling and dripping people into that queue line. this function allows you to look at the app, see which rides are available, and then plan your day. So if you open the app up and the most popular ride is fully booked until 12, but you've arrived at 9, you're not going to go to that ride because you can't book a ticket for it. So you book it for 12, go and do something else, and then at your time, go to the attraction. As I said, what you need to do as a park is just make sure you've got the buffer there so that as people turn up just for their time, you can still let them in and hold that capacity. That's how we flex this. Everyone will have fairly large capacities that when we set those parameters, that you make sure you've got those buffers in for when people arrive to make sure people are generally enjoying their day as they would do anyway.
So Pete, it is hit the 4 o'clock mark in the UK. I will give you one more question, and then what we can do is follow up on some of the questions that we haven't answered directly. And obviously, if you've got any more questions, please get in touch. You're going to feel very special if you're the question that Pete picks right now.
It is, yeah, you're going to win a car. I'm just looking for one that hasn't been asked already.
I set you up to fail here, Pete. We probably answered the majority of the questions on the.
We've answered most of these questions, I'm afraid.
Well, in that case, let me just wrap up, and I'm sure Pete, you'll want to say something at the end. But just if anybody that's interested, and I know I've said that, but just to reiterate, please get in contact with Pete. We're going to handle all of the inquiries that come through within the team over here at Holovis. What we'd look to be doing is booking in some initial consultation work. Obviously, all within the free crowd solo application, just to get a bit more information from yourselves over the nature of your park or your venue, and for us to instill what we need from your side in terms of information.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to thank everyone for tuning into this webinar. I come from a background of theme park operations. I was 12 years with Merlin, and I understand this must be a really trying time for a lot of you. So I just want you to know that we're trying our best to support, and we want you to open up as quickly as possible. And we hope you all survive this. And yeah, please do get in touch if there's anything else we can help you with. As I said, this is a principle of trying to support the industry that has supported us as a company for the past 15 years. So I think it's time we kind of gave back to that. So thank you very much, everyone, and good luck with everything.
Stay safe.
Cheers, guys. Bye.